Hello everyone. This is Shashank Garg from Alumni Cell PGDBA, postgraduate course in Business Analytics offered by IIM Calcutta, IIT Kharagpur and ISI Kolkata. I hope all of you are doing well and safe in these times. So PGDBA is one of the oldest program in field of analytics, AI and ML offering learning and experience from India's best three institutes. So this time PGDBA presents a webinar and panel discussion on the new business of AI, covering the art of setting up machine learning and artificial intelligence process to create tangible business value. The session will be moderated by Mr. Vinayak Hegde, the CTO in residence at Microsoft for startups. The panelists include the four AI experts and authors of the best-selling book Practical NLP. These are Ms. Sowmya Vajjala, Senior Research Officer at NRC Canada, ex-faculty at Iowa State University; Mr. Bodhisattwa Majumder, researcher at Microsoft USA and a PGDBA alum; Mr. Anuj Gupta, head of Vahan Incorporation and IIT Delhi graduate; and finally, we have Mr. Harshit Surana with us, co-founder of DeepFlux Inc. and CMU graduate, having experience working with MIT Media Lab. The session will be conducted in four phases, covering general AI in industry, how to do the AI the right way, the business applications in e-commerce, finance, and law. Each phase will be followed by questions and panel discussion. I would like to now hand over the session to Mr. Vinayak. Mr. Vinayak, over to you now.
Hi. Welcome to the webinar, and let's kick off by with a short intro. So my name is Vinayak Hegde. I'm the CTO-in-residence at Microsoft for startups, and I have implemented some NLP systems before, and also worked on a bunch of different different systems across industries. So I've been working with startups like InMobi and HelpShift and Zoomka before I joined Microsoft for Startups, which is a global team. With that, I would ask the panelists to maybe do a quick introductions about themselves before we actually get down to the presentation and the first part of the presentation, and then we'll follow it up with the question and answers in each of those.
Hello everyone, myself Bodhisattwa Majumder, in short Bodhi. So I'm currently a PhD student at University of California, San Diego, and also a researcher at Microsoft Research USA. I spent time before at Google AI, and I'm a proud alumni of the PGDBA course. I was a student of the first batch. I currently am working on NLP and various techniques to generate text for various user-facing applications, and I'm continuing my research in NLP. Thanks.
Anuj, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Vinayak. Hey everyone, I'm Anuj. I am currently heading the machine learning team at Vahan. And prior to this, I have incubated and led multiple machine learning teams in my career. I am an alumnus of IIIT Hyderabad and IIT Delhi. That's a short intro of myself. Soumya, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Soumya. First of all, I would like to thank the PGDBA team and Vinayak Hegde for doing this session with us. So a little bit about myself. I currently work as a researcher at National Research Council, Canada. And I am also an alumni of IIIT Hyderabad like Anuj, and I did my PhD in University of Tübingen, Germany. I've been working in NLP in various roles, both in academia and industry for the past decade.
Harshit, do you want to go next?
Can you guys see me? Hi. So I'm Harshit. I'm a co-founder and CTO at DeepFlux. I have been doing machine learning in academia and industry since 2007, and published research in NLP from 2007 to 11. I've been involved with IIIT Hyderabad, CMU, and MIT Media Lab in my academic journey.
Cool. So, Bodhi, what we can do is we can start off with the presentation on the first part with you, and then we'll take a short break for question and answers. Meanwhile, what you can also do is you can also put your question and answers in the chat, and we'll take them as we go through the sections. And whatever sections, whatever questions we are not able to take during the section due to paucity of time, what we'll do is we'll take those questions maybe at the end of the webinar. So over to you, Bodhi.
Sure. Thank you, Vinayak, for introducing us. And again, welcome everyone to this webinar where we talk about the new business of AI. So let's start with a video where we show that how powerful AI can be and how is it useful in our day-to-day life.
Today, new generations of workers use their phone and pictures as a primary way to communicate with their team. So we want to make that process a little bit simpler by adding some AI into the mix. Right on my phone, I can use Office to take a picture of this data that I want to share with my team. Now, Office will be able to intelligently convert this data into a real table in Excel automatically. I don't have to go through the process of manually entering line item by line item. It's all going to happen for me using AI. Now that this is something I can insert into Excel, I can start to work with it right here on my phone, or I can work with it on my laptop. Now that it's in Excel, I can start to co-edit and co-author with my team. I can format it as a table, manipulate this data, sort, and work with it in ways I just couldn't do with a static image. Now, this intelligence is also powering new experiences in PowerPoint with Presenter Coach, which gives me valuable insights as I rehearse my presentation, like this one, helping me show up more prepared every single time. Let's check it out. So I'm going to say rehearse with Coach. Now, before we get started here, what's going to happen is that as I rehearse my presentation, it's going to give me real-time feedback on all the different ways that I can improve, whether it's language choice or pacing. Let's see what that looks like. It is so great to be here with you guys and be able to share this presentation. I mean, you know, we've had a really, really great year, and I think there's some incredible research that we can share to really kickstart FY20. And yeah, you know, we had an incredible year, surpassing 500 million in revenue for the first time as a result of our team's focus on customer success and commitment to deliver quality. All right, let's finish there. Now, you may have noticed that it was giving me that feedback in real time. That's also been summarized in this report here. It picked up that I said you guys, which isn't super gender inclusive language, and recommended that I say you all instead. It caught some of my filler words like and I mean, and even let me know my pace was a little bit too fast. A great reminder to slow down. It even recognized when I was too dependent on the slide content itself, reading word for word, and even let me know exactly which slide I should probably familiarize myself with a little bit more. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah, so definitely incredible. And this kind of summarizes that how AI is not only, you know, transforming, you know, business processes, but it's also transforming the user applications and the way we, do our, you know, daily musings and, you know, very generic mundane works, but how AI can actually help to transforming that. So it's definitely extremely powerful, and we're in an age or era where it's soaring high with all of its application. So next we'll talk about that how AI is actually contributing to the global GDP, and as we see from this PwC report, that in 2030 it can reach to, you know, 15 trillion impact to the whole global GDP, which is huge, and we have already predicted that from the previous decade, and we are start of a new decade now, and it's still soaring high. Especially it's important that how AI is impacting on the global workforce, that almost 50% of the workforce are currently you know, trying to automate the process. So most of the time we see that now many of the mundane processes are automatable, and they're getting automated. So it's very important for the current workforce to learn this technology and equip themselves to handle these new services and products which are already automatable, which were not there, you know, 2-3 decades back. So it's very important that everyone now gear up themselves with this new tool, this new technology, and this will have a huge impact on the current global force and also in the coming times. Now, as we talked about the global impact and AI, which I think most of us are kind of familiar right now, but I think what's important is also to talk about what's happening in India, and that specifically we are focusing in this particular talk, that how we are doing AI, how we are doing machine learning, data science, etc., in the context of India. And if you see this particular visualization, it's encouraging, but it's not great. So, for example, you could see that India is very far ahead, very far away from the top countries in the world. For example, United States, China, even all the European countries, including Spain, Israel and Hong Kong, etc. So the amount of contribution we are making as a country is still far away from what the other leading countries are currently doing in the world. And as a statistics, for example, the amount of contribution India as a country is making, or through the number of research papers they're writing on the field of AI, is actually less than a one single world-class university in China. And that's an important statistics to understand, that how, where, and why should we pace up to that. So now it's time, I think, that with this current boom with AI, with all the technologies that are available to us, we have to pace up our progress in AI and contribution to the whole community. But it's just not only the negative sentiments or connotations that is attached with the current AI progress with India, because there are many companies and organizations in India that already have started taking up this space, starting up new projects, new areas where AI can really help. For example, I'll start with some government initiatives where they are trying to use this AI for various economic benefits, social goods, as well as building political strategies, etc. So that effort has already been started. So that on the top of the tree, but also from the bottom of the tree, where kids or young coders, they also have started educating themselves about AI, and from the very early age. So here are two examples: a girl of age 7 and a boy of age 12. They have developed AI products using AI that can help users, and that can bring some social good. So that's really encouraging and inspiring, that how the young generation is currently coming into this progress of AI, and that's definitely a very good sign of progress. So here I just want to make a stop, and then we can do a kind of open discussion, that how we are currently practicing AI in the industry, what are some good practices that we are doing, where we are lacking, where we are doing well. So I'll just open up our discussion to our panelists, and Vinayak, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I think AI is extremely powerful, right? So just before this webinar, I think I was talking with the panelists, and what we are seeing is what is known as probably the fourth industrial revolution. Klaus Schwab, who is one of the founders of the World Economic Forum, said we are in the fourth. He made a case for we are in the fourth iteration of the industrial revolution. The first one was powered by steam, the second with electricity, the third with electronics and IT, and to some extent even I would say oil, and the fourth one has a bunch of different technologies that are kind of pushing it to the next level. We have 3D printing, we have AI, we have robotics, we have Internet of Things, biotech, energy storage, quantum computing. But what is happening is that we are seeing that AI is actually, in some sense, even driving much more this transformation than anything else, because it's very transformative across industries. And we'll talk about that, whether it's finance, whether it's healthcare, whether it is government services. All of it is actually getting transformed in the way AI works. even including somewhat controversially law enforcement as well. So with this, I actually want to put a couple of questions to the panelists. Like, can you maybe give us a couple of examples, how AI is transforming every industry, and as I said, like, from agricultural practices to legal, from your own experience.
So Anuj, I think you should.
Vinayak, there are, I mean, other than a lot of cases or a lot of use cases which are common, there are a lot of unique scenarios where AI is being used to power some very, very interesting use cases and help these people. Uh, Similarly, if you look at uh, uh, things such as where you want to understand uh, edge cases or anomalies. I mean, there are a lot of interesting examples there where people are using to figure out, okay, there is something new up here. And this is not just in terms of, okay, there is a DOS attack or things like that, but people have tried to use even to understand, okay, there are new galaxies out there which humans were not able to find, and AI could figure out, oh, okay, here is something you should go and investigate. Bodhi, Harshit, you want to add any more examples?
So Anuj, I think we missed some of the things that you said at the start. So maybe it's worth repeating, especially what you are.
Okay.
Especially what you're
Okay. Am I audible now clearly?
Yes, you are. Okay.
Okay. So one of the use cases that we have been working extensively is to help blue collar workers in India to find jobs and hiring for what is called MSME. So we at Vahan are using AI to screen candidates, understand what they want, do a eKYC. And in order to power all of this at scale, we are using AI extensively to, to build for this particular use case.
Right. So I will talk about two examples. One is my own startup, and one is another startup that I'm helping out. One of the things we at Deflux do is help movie studios launch movies better. So movies have been around for almost 100 years. It's a very domain specific art, and it's much more of an art than it is a science. And it's interesting how still people who have been launching or creating movies for decades do not understand all the nuances as to what the audiences are thinking, all the nuances as that data can bring that human intuition cannot. So so that is something that we have been helping them out from figuring out which actor. So Disney happens to be one of our customers, and so figuring out which actors and equivalent actors in India should do dubbing to how they should launch or how they should target every zip code is something that will not have been possible without machine learning, data, and AI, and obviously NLP. So one aspect is that. Another very opposite aspect is a startup that is still in stealth mode, but what they are doing is trying to bring NLP and machine learning and AI to legal things. To legal things when it comes to investments specifically, and that is something which has always been a purview of lawyers and investment analysts, and and it's and that is why it was never democratized. Knowing someone at the right VC firm mattered much more before, but such platforms will make it easy for everyone to raise money or get the due diligence done and so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, do you want to add to that?
Yes, sure. I spent some time working in two very different industries, working primarily on NLP, natural language processing, but with other AI teams. So there is some industry which you may not expect to use a lot of AI, but it does. It's the newspaper industry. So I worked for Canada's largest newspaper, the Globe and Mail, for some time, and we had a very large AI team working on many different things. Like one example where I worked hands-on was comment moderation. So we developed a machine learning system to moderate comments on the website. So because people, I mean, general public comment on a lot of things, and some people go abusive, and some people maybe comment on completely irrelevant things. So that was one use case for AI in the newspaper industry. And there was also a lot of work on personalization of news based on the region of the author, of the reader, and their interests, and doing ad sourcing based on the user profiles, building user profiles, building models of customer retention. So in the age of in the digital age, even newspapers have to do all these things to stay relevant. The one other use case I can quote from the legal domain, which Vinayak was also mentioning, was data redaction. So when we want to use a lot of legal files, so I was working for a company which developed software for lawyers. So when we were taking documents from them and doing some kind of NLP with them, we need to ensure privacy of these documents. So one of the problems we worked on was developing a system to automatically redact personally identifiable information. So these are some of the use cases of AI away from traditional technology industries that you may see.
Yeah, so I think since we talked about the Indian context, let's talk a little bit about that. So what are the challenges faced by Indian academia and startups, especially when the state of the art is moving so fast? Um, 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 Maybe one of you can take this up. Maybe Harshit, you can start off.
Right. So I think I'll speak a little about the academia part also, because I've been part of that. So one thing that, why we see China is doing so well, China ahead in all rankings, or, barely behind US, is China did a very good job of bringing its academics back to the country. So, US or UK are, a lot of universities there have been the foundational research institutes for a long time, and lots of Indian and Chinese people were trained there. But most Indians who were trained ended up being in working in the US, or if they come back to India, they work at a place like Microsoft Research. But they rarely have been invited to Indian universities as much. And I think many Indian machine learning professors have also talked about it. And I think there's a pretty dire need of machine learning professors who are coming back from India and training this new crop. I think that is one reason why India is lacking, and I think how it affects startups in some senses. Startups, when they are doing cutting edge, extreme cutting edge, it always helps to partner with researchers, with academics who might be on a very cutting edge, but may not know or may not want to focus on how to commercialize it. So I think that is something that, if we look at a lot of, say, Chinese startups or British startups and obviously US startups, that academia industry partnership is very strong, which is, I feel, a little weaker in India.
Cool. So I think there was a couple of questions about, finance. So I think finance and industry has taken on AI for quite some things. Like, in fact, things you would not even think of, right? For example, at the junction of finance and journalism, you see all of these reports that are coming out, and there are bots and software that actually look at these financial reports and actually put out releases. Like, there is a company called Narrative Science that does that. And if you look at hedge funds also, they use AI to actually figure out what is the best practice to actually come up with a strategy, when to sell, when to buy, what is the differential. And they have done backtesting over lots of decades, not just years. So it financial industry has in some sense been at the forefront of adopting this. Quickly, I'll change tack a little bit, talking about India, as Harshit did. What we also had is, like, India is obviously is a very unique country in a sense, unlike China or the US, which is, like, in some sense, I would not say largely, but in some sense have a monoculture in terms of language. But India is very varied in terms of language. So when it comes to, like, NLP, what happens is, already people who are not that literate in terms of computers are also left behind. So AI can actually be very inclusive. One example of a startup that I am personally working with is, what they have done is they have built iconography where you can actually just talk to the phone, and it will bring up those icons, and it, you can actually use it for depositing money or transferring money, and you did not know any language, and you can talk about it in native language. So they have it done it in Telugu, Kannada, and Odia, right? So this is something that is very, very interesting, because the way the use cases that we see in the West, we do not necessarily have to copy paste here. We can actually come up with new things, and that is where I think both the industry, what Harshit said, both the industry and academia can actually collaborate and come up with solving some of the very, very India specific problems that we have.
I'll just add to, I was talking about things that are not working, but then I would just add one case, that is very interesting, that is happening in India. So that is not a project that I directly am involved in, but that is a friend's thing. And what they are doing is they are analyzing all the Supreme Court law cases, and which deal with land rights. And why they are doing it, that is this analysis is helpful in future land rights cases. So what is land right? Land right is, hey, you need an environmental clearance if you're clearing a forest or clearing agricultural land and converting that to industry. And how would generally courts rule on that? Now that is something which was never studied, and if you give a legal analyst or a team of legal analysts to do that, what they tell me is that even understanding one or two cases, they might take weeks, and understanding them at scale, they might take even much longer. But now, because you can use NLP, you can use machine learning to analyze all of that, that essentially will be helping the underprivileged or the people who are, for whom the law is not always on the right side, to fight things better, and have better environment in India as an instance. So that there are some interesting things that are happening in different ways. So what you said was very for consumers, for everyone. What I'm saying is more from the legal angle, where the best lawyers cannot reach those conclusions.
Yeah. So before we move on quickly, I'll talk about another case where there's a media startup, and what they're doing is basically using neural networks to actually enhance the video at the end, right? So for example, you're looking at it on 3G or 5G connection, which is a very specific case to India, and even with like 4G and like Geo going kind of taking that revolution of data across across India, you still have many cases even in urban areas, or even like in semi-rural or rural areas, where you do not have a great connection, and it uses neural networks to enhance the quality of the moving video. With that, I think we have kind of taken 30 minutes on this, so maybe we can quickly move to the meat of the presentation, which is on the tech, and then obviously we'll talk about many of these use cases as well and take more questions. So yeah, you can keep on posting your questions in the chat. So Bodhi, do you want to go on the next section?
Sure. Thanks for the nice discussion. So now let's move on. As we talked about how AI is actually is being all pervasive in various industries, as we talked about. Let's see some of the AI processes that we are doing right, and some processes that we are not doing right, and let's see what are they, and how do we talk about it, and what are some resources where you can look into. So here we present the book we recently wrote with O'Reilly. It's practical natural language processing, but primarily it focuses on various analysis of text, and how could you apply AI on various text applications. But not only that, it also heavily focuses on all of the good practices that we have seen in industry throughout our year-long experiences, and we collected them to find out what are some good practices when you start a AI project, or what are some good practices when you build a new AI team, so that it can give you early success whenever you are starting a new project or a new team in any context, and could also apply for Indian context. So just a quick announcement here. At the end of the talk, we'll have a short giveaway so that all of the participants can access our book for a limited amount of time, so that you can see what we are offering, and if you like, then you can go ahead purchasing the book. We'll share the details at the end of the presentation. Yeah, so before I talk about the book, I think we are extremely fortunate to have Vinayak to review our book. And as he rightly says that this book kind of combines the very hard fought and practical advices from the trenches. So that's what we wanted to emphasize on in this book, as well as in this webinar as well. That what are some advices we have seen in the trenches when we actually went out there and tried to deploy certain solutions, especially NLP solutions, AI solutions, and what are the problems we have faced and how did we manage them. So this is a kind of a resource that combines all of that understanding and wisdom. I think we have already introduced us. So I'll move on that why do we need another AI book? Or to be specific, why are we even talking today? Because all of the resources and that people are generally interested in about algorithms, data are already available out there in the internet through various other books, textbooks, blogs, etc. Right? So before we go into them and start looking at fancy algorithms, etc., I think there are a couple of dimensions that we definitely wanted to focus in the book as well as in this talk, and overall we wanted to emphasize on them. I think one of the most important things we wanted to discuss that whenever you're doing a project, do you really need to apply machine learning? Do you does your problem at all need machine learning or not, or can you just solve it very effectively, cheaply, efficiently, using some very rule based and generic solutions, and that just works? So you may not need a huge hammer to bring down a small nail, right? So that's very important, that what should be your strategy to when to use rule based more techniques, when to use machine learning, when to use deep learning. That's a very important thing, and most of the time the resources out there available are kind of misleading, and they don't create these distinctions that when you want to use what. Another important dimension that is very important is how much data you have when you start a project. So usually when you start a new project, then you may not have a lot of data. So what kind of models, what kind of techniques, what kind of strategies you should take. So the volume of the data is very important in that decision, and that's something we definitely want to emphasize on. I think similarly, in machine learning operations, how do you deploy these products out there? How do you monitor them? And all of that combined in a project playbook is very important. That was kind of missing. So that's why we try to combine that in this book, as well as we'll talk through in this particular webinar as well, and how that will be useful for all of us. And especially we didn't come up of these dimensions out of thin air. We were actually conducting lots of workshops and tutorials like this, and we were mentoring folks starting from undergraduate students to even industry professionals at times. And we actually found out that these are some genuine problems that people are mostly clueless about. So we thought that it's a good opportunity and it's the right time to talk about it and make everyone aware. And in general, I think this knowledge, in general, whatever we try to talk in the book as well as in this webinar, can affect a range of professionals in the industry. Starting from data scientists. I think maybe in our audience, most of the people are in data science industry, but also definitely very very useful for business folks like product manager, or even an ML engineer, or even a business leader, because it's very important to know that what you can do and what you cannot do, setting the right expectations, defining the problem the way the algorithm wants it is very very important. So it's not only technical people, but also business people can be heavily impacted positively with this knowledge. So in a sum up, see, there are so many things that you could know, that you could do in general applications, starting from very core tasks of NLP and general AI, like classification, information extraction, building a chatbot, building a question answering system, to going to very industry specific applications like social media analysis, retail data extraction and analysis. In healthcare, health record analysis, legal entity extraction, we already talked about, there's so so many range of things that you could do. We try to talk about that in the book, and we'll talk about throughout the course of this particular session. But this just shows you that the amount of possibility you could do with AI. So before I jump on, I think to very specific use cases, I think it's very important to talk about this very high level pipeline of how what's the good practice of building an AI project and teams. And that's the beauty of it, that when we developed APIs before, like we as in authors, or we have developed AI solutions before, built our AI teams in various startups. We have found out that there is a core theme that always are present there, and oftentimes we miss that, and that's why we end up in a wrong result, or undesirable results. So if I start with certain pipelines, certain planning, certain recipes for building an AI team or hiring, I think what is most important is to think about that what's the problem you're going to solve, what's the business problem you're going to solve. And I think we were having a discussion with Vinayak, and he, as he rightly mentioned, that defining this business problem is very, very important. And not only defining this business problem, but converting the business problem to a technical problem, to an AI problem, is one of the most critical steps. And we oftentimes do not spend a lot of time in this particular step, and we often just cursorily doing things that are common out there. So it's very important that how do you convert this business problem to an AI problem that your current algorithm can take it. And after that, I think one of the most important steps that we often miss, I have seen it from my experience, we all have seen it from our experiences, that setting up the right expectation. So whenever you're trying to solve a problem, and you know that these are the certain pathways that you could go with so and so algorithms that you have in your pocket, it's very important to set the right expectation that what you could achieve using all of these pathways at the end. If you could say, if you set your expectations something that you will get 100% accuracy, that probably is not right, and you might be iterating in a wrong model, in a wrong strategy that will never able to reach you to that particular expectation, and you will eventually won't be able to finish the project. So I want to emphasize the point that very high level here, that in any of the AI process, I think there are 3 steps. One is data, second is model, and third is deployment. And it may sound that it's a unidirectional process, but in general, it's a very iterative process. So we many times have to start with the data, do some modeling, do some deployment, but that doesn't end there, because you have to continuously monitor what you have deployed, continuously analyze that how your product or model is performing, and then again look back to collect more data or even different data if you need, then again come to the modeling part, again deploying. So it's a very, very iterative process, and we often miss out this iteration part, and we just go in a unidirectional way. So in overall, I think there is a concrete pipeline, and if you put this scheme in any projects you have done before, including in a software development, I think that's kind of true, but it's more true in AI projects, that this kind of iterations are more apparent in these AI projects, where you have to experiment to understand if your product is working well or not. And I think this kind of supports what I just talked about. And industry folks like experts from, let's say, Microsoft, they have come up with this this overall pipeline, this flowchart. It basically talks about the same thing, that start with the business understanding, do the data acquisition, do the modeling, do the deployment, but then again circulate back in an iterative fashion. And most of the time, I think setting up the right expectation is important, because there is often a huge mismatch in what we expect and what the reality is. And it also comes with the cost of time and the resources that you put in. So the ROI on AI it should be very carefully evaluated, that how much time you're putting, how much resources you are putting, and what's the reasonable performance you can expect, and then you can move on. Just to show that how this applies in a use case. For example, I think many of us know about chatbot, and we have seen chatbots. So here you see that it's a very generic pipeline, starting with speech recognition, then doing some NLP, and then doing some dialogue management, and then again converting back that response to the speech is a very overall and generic pipeline. But if you go into detail, there are nuances that are there with these chatbots, and if we don't understand this, if we don't set up the problem in the right way, we may not end up in an effective solution. For example, if you want to build an FAQ bot, like a bot that can answer frequently asked questions for your website, you maybe don't need machine learning for this. You just need to understand, find out relevant keywords in the user's questions, and just point out to a set answers that you have already stored in the database. A more complex bot would be a flow-based bot where you're trying to order a pizza, and that needs certain states to be maintained throughout the conversation. That what's the pizza size, what's some of the flavors you wanted to use, what's the address, what's your payment step, etc. So there you may need a little complicated model where you capture all of this information from user responses, store them in a hierarchical manner, and then finally execute your action based on all of that store examples. And one of the most complex tasks currently in AI is an open-ended bot where you can just have a open-ended topical conversation on anything like chit chat. For example, there are so many assistants out there like Alexa, Siri, and then in Microsoft Cortana and Google you have Google Chat, etc. So it's very, very difficult because there you don't have a set goal and you need very complex, maybe of course deep learning models to solve this. But the problem is oftentimes whenever we are trying to solve the problem 1, we are using the solutions of problem 3. And it's not needed, and sometimes it may even work worse than what simple rule-based model method can actually work. So that's very important to understand how you're converting your problem to a technical problem and what are the set of algorithms that you would like to start with. Like for example, as I think Vinayak talked about, and it's very relevant in the context of India, that oftentimes there are lots of code mixing or language mixing that happens whenever you have deployed a product in a geography where there are users that they can talk about multiple languages. Like you can easily talk in 3 languages, like maybe English, Hindi, and in your mother tongue when you are ordering a pizza, and a model should be able to understand all of that, because as you know that most of the models are kind of built on top of English, which are mostly used, but that's not often true, and that probably may not be even useful if you actually put that in a product and deploy that in an Indian context. So it's very important that you understand the data, you understand user demography, and then you choose up your strategy. With this, I just wanted to open up again a brief question answering about with all of our panelists, and let's see how we think about this AI process and what are some good examples of it. And yeah, so over to you, Vinay.
Yeah, hi. So I think code mixing is a great India specific example, right? I mean, you are in Bangalore, you are in any kind of a city, especially in the south or the west or the east, where Hindi is not predominant, or even in Delhi, right? You'll probably mix like Hindi and English, or Hindi, Marathi, and English in Bombay. And while it's like we seamlessly actually switch languages and we can understand each other, it's actually a fairly hard problem to do that for computers. And if you see how you talk to, maybe for example, chat agents, right? Or even nowadays you can even converse with conversational AI, right? Like using voice recognition. That makes the communication really hard, right? So the frontier of NLP is actually moving, and it's a very specific India specific problem that we can actually crack with. So with that, I just quickly wanted to talk a little bit about the process, and understand from the panelists, what are the major challenges in building AI teams and running AI projects, and how is AI in some sense fundamentally different from rest of engineering. So maybe start with Anuj, and then maybe we can have Harshit also speak, and then other panelists can also chime in.
Yeah, thank you, Vinay, for this interesting question. There are a lot of challenges. The first one always starts with data. the quality of data, the quantity of data. Do you have the right data for the right problem? You might have a lot of data, but you may not have the data for the problem that you're trying to solve. So data becomes, and in industry often working with data becomes 80% of the AI problem. The second part is also, are you solving the right problem? Uh, uh, Unfortunately, because of all this hype, it has also become kind of where anything that is tough, it is believed AI can solve, which is not the case. And solving for the right use case that really brings out value proposition is very important. And I can give an example that I've seen, which I feel as one of the best examples or best applications of AI that I have seen is, so if you are using a doc or a PowerPoint, we often end up using special characters. And there are lots of special characters for which searching them is not easy because you don't even know their name. Now, there is this very nice utility whereby you have a scratch pad whereby you can draw these special characters that you're looking for. Because we all often remember how the special character looks as opposed to what it is called. And the machine is quickly able to figure out, okay, what is the closest match to this and suggest it. Now, this is an example of a great use case whereby AI is very helpful. So I would say a couple of things. Data, are you solving the right problem? Third is the timing part of it. Is it the right time to apply AI to this problem? Often because of limitations of data and other constraints such as even hardware. I mean, GPT-3 is a great model. It's doing so many wonders. Does it mean you can directly use in your production system? Maybe not, because you need to look at the cost, the inference time, and other constraints. If you are especially deploying an edge, it may not be very suitable. So things like these are some of the things that one needs to be very aware of when picking AI to solve a particular problem. Harshit, do you want to add more points?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vinayak. I think this is a very relevant question. And thank you, Anuj, to whatever you said. So, and I'll just extend to what Anuj said is that often figuring out the right ROI for your AI project is very important because, right now there's this trend or hype that everything which is hard, AI can solve that. But fully automatable AI in almost all cases, whether it be a self-driving car or whether it be a simple model that can answer customer requests, is very hard, right? So one has to understand to what level of automation would help, and then when humans can come and augment whatever AI is giving us an output. The second thing, obviously, is difficulty in building certain kinds of models or certain kinds of applications. There could be data problems. There could be even problems with respect to hiring right people, or if you can find the right expertise. So a lot of those things have to be considered before before somebody embarks on an AI journey for a particular project. So yeah.
Sorry, I just unmuted myself. So I just wanted to address one question that is kind of latent in some of the conversations. I feel that there is undercurrent like where people are asking, can AI replace humans? I would say that we are actually in some sense where AI can actually augment humans, especially in the fields where there is direct human impact, right? And also I think it's especially in the case like in autonomous cars or in the case of legal sentencing or in the case of healthcare where there's direct human impact. I think there's this concept of agency, right? Like for example, let's say autonomous car goes and hits a person. So who should blame for that? Is it the engineer who designed? Is it the guy in the car? Or who should? So in humans, and actually if you look at those cars, right, those kind of accidents might actually be happening at a much lesser frequency than humans. So the AI might actually be better than humans, right? But there is a concept of agency, right? Whom can we kind of in some sense pin the blame for, right? if you are at the other end of the spectrum, right, and you have to choose, right, kind of moving down in the crowd, who has that agency, right? So there's this concept of agency that you can read up more on, and it applies in a multitude of fields, right, where I think there is a necessity to have human in a loop, because um, as engineers we are also used to having deterministic systems, right? You build a web app and the web app actually works well, and it works pretty much the same way if you repeat the same step. But AI is not in some sense that way, right? I mean, slightly difference amount of difference in the data, and the results can be quite different. Sometimes you are able to explain it, and sometimes you may not be able to explain it. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but I wanted to bring up the concept of agency in some of these fields, because I saw a bunch of questions about that as well. Also, I think maybe quickly, can we maybe talk about auto ML? Maybe like Bodhi and Soumya, can you chime in about auto ML as well? If we have, like, I think one of the questions is, if we have auto ML, why do we need data scientists, right? Which also kind of fills in with the process and the thinking behind data science.
Soumya, you can go if you want.
Yeah, I just want to add one comment about AutoML. So I don't think it replaces data scientists. I just think it makes data scientists more productive. Because, like, say, for example, in a lot of cases, if you want to, there are many different parameters to explore, and there are many features to optimize. So we may end up doing a lot of things like manually. I mean, not literally manually, but we have to do a lot of repetitive experiments, changing a few things. So I think AutoML reduces that workload in some sense, because that part of that process is automated. But I don't really see it as completely replacing data scientists, because you still need a data scientist to understand what to do and what is going on.
Yeah, I just want to add a small add-on that oftentimes, like, the metric you are optimizing with the AutoML is not exactly what's the business metric you really care at the end of the day. So you can only optimize metrics that are technically well defined, let's say some accuracy or some F1 score or something like that, and you can get a certain performance that definitely indicative of that your model is working well or not. But end of the day, a data scientist, a business leader has to make a final decision that what's your product is actually doing when it is deployed out there with the users, and how the users is reacting with it, and then doing the iterations of the bigger iterations, that what, like, the data you started, is it the right data to start with, the model you're using, is it a good right model to work with, is the latency is good, etc., etc. So AutoML is definitely not the end of the story, but it's definitely a great tool to fasten the process of this mechanical iterations that you could have just skipped.
Also, I'll just add that a data scientist's job is not just to build a model. That's probably a very small percentage of what a data scientist does, and people often forget that. Other parts are much more untangible, and it's hard for machines or AutoML to do.
Yeah, I think the unsaid truth here, I think it's a little funny, but it's the absolute truth, that is that a lot of data scientists actually spend a lot of time kind of getting their data right, or data cleaning. And this is, in some sense, the most toughest part of the job. And I think ML is also helping there. You have better tools now, but I think that is like the grunt work that you have to do. And maybe even 5% is like what is actually portrayed in the media or anywhere else, and that is like the nature of media. So with that, I think let's quickly move on to the next section. So Bodhi can take over the next section. We just a time check, we are 60 minutes in, so maybe we have two sections, and here we'll talk about most of the use cases in a little more detail. Yeah, so over to you, Bodhi. Bodhi, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think let's start quickly with the slides, because and I'll quickly go over them, because we'll anyway make them public. I think the question answering is, and the panel discussion is probably more beneficial to the audience. So here we talk about various use cases that where this AI can actually help us. I think we have already talked about a lot. So for example, you want to do a corporate ticketing classification. For example, all the tickets that you get, let's say all the issues that you get in GitHub, and all the tickets that you get for your product, how do you kind of bucket them in a meaningful manner so that it's useful for for you to manage them at the end. And I think what is the most important about this particular task is not what model you want to use, but various stages of this whole process. That when you start this project, let's say you're a new company, you want to start this process, you definitely don't have lots of level data. Maybe you don't have any data. So and then you have to start with a data collection phase where you have to come up with public APIs or libraries where you could get this kind of label data, or maybe take a public data set, or maybe create a new data set. Once you do that with a limited capacity, you build a model, and then you deploy that model out there, and maybe with a control set, and then you see that how user is reacting with that particular product, and see where your model is failing, because it will of course fail because you didn't have the perfect data. And then you try to gather those data points where your model is not doing well, and try to see that what's the distribution, how that data looks like. Is it very different from what you have started with? And if it is true, then go back again to the first phase of data collection, maybe change your data collection strategy, and then again perform this iterative loop. So here maybe the model iterations is something you can just do with AutoML, where you don't have to perform a lot of iterative tasks, even figuring out what's the best model, but you could rather spend more time on this bigger iterative loop. A similar example is extracting meeting information from chat. I'm not going into too much details, but it's the same thing. It's similar pipeline that you could use, coming up with a data collection strategy, coming up with the initial model with less amount of data, and then deploy it, and then see how it works. But yeah, I mean, if we want to open up again with the question answering, Vinayak, let me know, or I can actually move over to more specific domain specific discussions, and then maybe we can.
Let's move to the next slide, and then we can take Q&A for the last section.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, I mean, as we were talking about various use cases, I think one of the interesting use cases I've worked with is recipe recommendation. It was a fun project that whenever a user comes to a recipe website, can you recommend them a recipe? And what we thought, that can you actually recommend them a new recipe which is personalized based on their culinary experiences, their taste, their mood, etc. So maybe it's a common recipe. Maybe you can show a recipe that is already out there from a database, but you could generate a new recipe with all of these tidbits. And that's where I think the applications of this recommendation is useful, and we have seen the presence of this kind of recommendation algorithm a lot in e-commerce. So I think e-commerce and retail is one of the most important domains in India, and many of the folks are currently working on this domain. So one of the problems often we try to solve is, what are the products that go together? We call them substitute, or what are the products that kind of bought complementary? So it's one complements with the other. For example, a sock with a shoe. And there are, I'm sure many of us know there are various algorithms that can attack this particular problem. Like, you can start with a very simple basket analysis. You start with something like a collaborative filtering, which is a little more complicated but not very intensive. And then you slowly move on in the ladder of predictive algorithm and build more complex algorithm. For example, building a model with images which deals with computer vision, or building a model with the reviews you have, and try to connect them with each of the products using deep learning and text analysis. So there's a range of algorithms, and so you need to really decide that what you start with, and what is the model that fits best with your use case. And and I think what's important is that along with all of these use cases, for example, this product recommendation, and building e-commerce catalog, doing review analysis, sentiment analysis on the review based on various aspects, etc. These are all out there, and these are the tasks where you can impact heavily with AI, but with a range of models, starting with a very simple rule-based model, statistics, basic statistics-based models, to more complex using multimodal data like or unstructured data like images, text. There are so many things you could do. But I think what is the most important, and here, that how do you pick which model you want to use, and what we talk about at great length in our book, that there's something called A/B testing that you could do, and it's definitely very much possible and used in the domain of e-commerce and retailing, where you could build various models and then expose them with a set of control group to actually see how user is reacting. And as I was saying before, that AutoML is not the end, because here you have to really understand that how user is actually reacting to what you are recommending. That is, are users actually viewing the product, or are they actually converting to a purchase? So what is the conversion ratio of a user from viewing the product to purchasing that product? And that's something you definitely cannot optimize with this AutoML and all of this iterative process, but you have to do with these experiments, where you expose various models to various set of groups and perform this A/B testing. So I think here is a good logical point to open up for question answering specific for the e-commerce domain, and I think many of us have worked extensively on it. So yeah, we can talk about this more. So Vinayak, over to you.
Yeah, so e-commerce is a very interesting domain, because you have so many streams of data come in. You have the past history of the purchaser. You have what he has clicked on, what have other people purchased. So it is a very right field for actually testing some of these things, and it's also very interesting because the impact of AI can be easily measured, right? Which is like increase in the revenue or increase in the profitability. So maybe we can quickly go across the panel and maybe talk about maybe 2 or 3 use cases of AI that we have seen in e-commerce.
So I think talking about the use cases, right? Uh, so we have seen that oftentimes there are problems that we don't think that could be solved with AI. For example, I think one of the problem I worked in one of my previous companies is how do you create a product catalog automatically using AI from very starting of the pipeline where the product comes in, right? So and there is a huge process that is often involved, like a manual process, that the seller has to incorporate all these important details to the website, and oftentimes they're busy if there's a lot of product, or maybe they miss some certain important information that hinders the user's ability to search the product or find out the product or looking for important information. So how do you automate that process using AI? And we had a great success of that in one of my previous work. So that is an example where we never thought about applying AI to automate that process, because we thought that the process was already very complicated. But we saw that using AI can actually help us a lot to have a nice warm start, I would say. So that's one of the interesting use cases I think I worked on, beyond like the normal ones, like review analysis, sentiment analysis, product recommendation.
Cool.
I can add another very interesting use case. So many of you might be aware that Amazon, while it is working with a lot of vendors in India to serve the needs of the customer, they're also building their own labels in parallel so that they can own the supply chain also. One of the things their teams is doing is that on the existing product, they are applying AI to figure out what are people complaining about, and this is especially true for fashion, and then feeding that as an input to their teams who are in the label side to build clothing that can address those concerns and those trends if if those trends are significant enough. And that's a very interesting use case as to how AI is being used to identify a deficiency, and then there are other teams which are working on fulfilling that deficiency.
So I would talk about one more use case, very interesting use case that I saw recently. A startup is addressing that. So what it does is, like, we all have access to Instagram and images, right? And many times you want to buy a shirt with a print that you want, or buy a top which is like built in a which has a certain style. So what that app does is, actually, you can take a picture and it will tell you which store has that particular color, has that particular style. And now that is very interesting, right? Because now you can use the app to actually figure out, like, what was, like, say, Meghan Markle, wearing in at the royal wedding, or what was Aishwarya Rai wearing at Cannes, or even maybe it could be like what is Virat Kohli wearing, maybe when he's practicing, right? Maybe he's wearing a sweatshirt that you like. So you can actually go and just take pictures, and then it will tell you whether which retailer, and what is the SKU, which is like the specific product code that you can find, which is closest to what you have taken picture of. So it's very interesting, and there are also other applications in augmented reality. For example, I've seen a lens card, for example, where you can actually use augmented reality and use computer vision to actually try out different glasses using the app. So e-commerce has been using AI in so many different ways. I mean, we can just have a separate webinar just about that. So with that, I think let's maybe move on to the next section, and we'll talk about healthcare, finance, and law. And then I think some of you have been asking about the book, how to get it. So we'll talk about that also at the end as well. So what do you, Bodhi?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, let's move to another domain, which is, I think, very important and like extremely growing. We are seeing extremely growing number of applications of AI. Is this critical domains like healthcare, finance, and law? Yeah. So I think we have a nice discussion. We can have a nice discussion around it. And I'm seeing some of the questions previously asked, that the explainability, the fairness, and the ethics are probably one of the most intangible aspects, but one of the most important aspects in all of these three domains. And starting from collecting data, having right permissions, if you can use that data to building a model that can protect the privacy of the users and patients in case of healthcare, and as well as in the other domains, is extremely important. And here we show a range of applications of AI or machine learning could impact various tasks or various topics in healthcare. But in general, it's very important that to have a model that is explainable end of the day, and whenever you are explaining, that explanation should be in line with what we are actually dealing with in the real time in the domain, as well as having the ethics right or having the fairness right for all of these algorithms. So without further ado, I think let's open up this again for a question answering and a discussion about ethics in AI and fairness in AI and explainability in AI. Yeah, over to you, Vinayak.
Yeah, so I think one of the questions is that, since which naturally comes from the discussion we have had so far, is that okay, we get it that AI is affecting everything from the kind of drugs that the doctor is recommending to me, to whether I will get a loan or not, to whether what I should buy, right? Now all of this is fine, but like when there is a huge amount of impact, how do I make sure one is that the data that is getting fed into the algorithm, that is that is validated. So how do I have fairness, right? I'm not discriminating, or many times I'm not the discrimination is not built in, but the data set is such that automatically has the biases of the people who have built that data set. A great example is maybe in India, for example, markers of caste or social status to giving loans, right? And now that can be wide. If you take this data and you train the ML algorithm will say, hey, people with such a surname, maybe should not be given a loan, whereas that guy might have a very good credit score, and some other features might be useful. So how do you kind of prevent against that? So that is one part. The second part is a lot of the algorithms, especially in unsupervised learning. We know that they work, but we cannot easily explain in many cases why do they kind of make the decisions that they want, right? So with humans you can reason, and there is a form of redressal, right? Because you're talking to a person, you can always change it, man. But with algorithm, especially because it's probabilistic, there may not be well-defined redressal system. So how do you take care of fairness, accountability, and transparency? And how do you actually take care of this entire range of issues that it can cause, and how do you kind of work around it, especially in cases of finance, in healthcare, in law? um, they can have a huge impact on the life of a person. So with that, I actually want to open it up to the panelists. What are their kind of um, what are the kind of issues that they have seen, and how have they used it to redress them?
I think there are many things, and it's a huge area where people are currently working on. Starting something called federated learning to fairness in ML, where finding out that how the decisions of these machine learning models are affected by the data itself. So I think I just want to talk about one thing, because there are too many things to talk about. But as you rightly pointed out, that the data we start with often create biases to what we are predicting in the day. And one of the research actually we did in our lab, that how the current e-commerce data automatically incorporate marketing bias in the product recommendation, and that affects the customer purchase. So I won't go into details of that, but I think what we have found out end of the day is the data we have started with has already had these biases. So it's not the problem often in the model, but often it's a problem in the data itself, that the bias are incorporated. So there are lots of effort that gone into fixing these machine learning models to make them perfect or fair, but oftentimes we start with wrong data, and that always incorporate this uh, disparate results. So that is something, and that could be more profound in the case of healthcare and this specific domain. So data is one of the important things that we also should look into along with all the models. That's my 2 cents. I would just ask others to talk about.
So I would just say that, just like Vinayak said, that interpretability of the model and explainability with respect to why a certain classification or outcome was decided is very important. And that is actually one of the reasons that a lot of traditional enterprises, where explainability is very important, would never rely on a deep learning model. Like if you talk to a trader or a quant who is talking to some machine, to some stat people in their team, that why do they make a certain decision and why they don't. A deep learning model may not allow them to have that kind of interpretability that they may get from more simpler models. And this interpretability is very important when making certain decisions, right? Similarly, in healthcare, there are so many tools that are there, which where somebody can put all the medicines as an example and understand what reactions, what overreactions can one medicine do to another. But if it was a model which was uninterpretable, doctors wouldn't use that, as opposed to even if it's a simpler model which has to be somewhat hand coded or somewhat rule derived. But if it is interpretable, it's very useful. I'll add another point to this broader discussion, is that things like, if you are in healthcare and you were building a wellness company, and part of what your wellness company did is diagnosing, doing what is called pre-primary healthcare. So diagnosing any major issues you have and then routing you to correct doctor. You don't need to build all those diagnosis models from scratch, right? Because there are SaaS companies who give you this as a service, right? Similarly, there are SaaS companies which give a lot of legal things as a legal NLP analysis as a service. We were talking about e-commerce earlier. So, it's very different at a place like at a large company which has all the resources, and they can build complex e-commerce stuff. But a small SMB or even a large enterprise which doesn't have a strong tech backbone would not be able to build a team which can do what a larger, what a dominant marketplace could. And that is where a lot of SaaS companies are helping. And even in my startup, we are trying to do some of those things for retail SMB folks. But we are seeing that even large enterprises, somewhat larger enterprises, well-known brands, they just don't have the AI backbone, or at times even the data and tech backbone to build all of that. And that is why such companies become fruitful, whether it be healthcare, legal, or e-commerce.
Cool. So maybe what we can do is maybe we can quickly go over unless like Anuj and Soumya want to add something to this, what we can do is we can move on to the next section about the book, and then take any other questions that we have.
Yeah.
So over to you both.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, I think then just to sum up everything, that as I started with this image, that there are so many things we can talk about, and we have touched upon only in the surface of it. But essentially, we talk about many of these things already in the book, and definitely extremely fortunate to get endorsed with a range of experts in the field, starting from scientists of Amazon AI, professors at CMU, scientists at Google DeepMind, and to all the big companies like Google, Microsoft. So extremely fortunate to be endorsed by them. And I think one of the common things they have always talked about, that we touch upon the real state of the art algorithms or state of the art processes that one should follow while building NLP solutions or AI solutions. And it's also extremely encouraging for us to be in #1 new release in Amazon.com, and we are definitely expecting that a lot of you would actually collect the book and give us important feedback, that what do you think about it, and how we could have improved in subsequently. So a good announcement that there is an Indian subcontinent edition that's been out there and probably already started being available in India. So it will come very soon in Amazon. So you could actually grab a Indian copy, locally, so that you don't have to wait long to get it shipped from outside India. And with that, I'll end with all of the important links. I think that those have been already shared in the chat, and we'll also soon share the link for the giveaway of this book, where you could access the book for a month in the O'Reilly platform. And if you like it, then definitely grab a copy. I would like to say thank you everyone for being there so far, and it's been a great discussion. Thank you all the panelists and Vinayak to host us. I think now we can open up for all the other discussions and question answering.
Yeah. So I think we have talked a lot about different, kind of applications of NLP, but I think the elephant in the room is like GPT-3, right? So I wanted to, before we actually stop this webinar, I wanted to talk to the different panelists. Like, we have seen like a lot of hype on Twitter, and people are saying, oh, this makes a lot of data scientists like, replaceable, because I can just use the API of GPT-3, and people have been like generating paragraphs, and people have been generating tweets, and overall it seemed interesting. So I just wanted to there was a question about this as well, so let me quickly read it out. So there's a lot of hype for GPT-3 for its application, but there's still few areas where GPT-3 cannot be used to the full extent, like understanding business objective, data cleaning, feature engineering, and domain knowledge. So my query is, if GPT-6 or 7 comes up, which can automate NLP completely, what will be the future of NLP? Right. I think that is a great question to end the session on. So I think I would kind of open up the question to all of the panelists before we stop.
Yeah, I can just start talking about it. So currently, I've been researching on various generative models in NLP, and definitely GPT. Even all of us like researchers are also confused at times that is GPT-3 is the final bullet. But actually, with a careful look at the model, what we see that it's still really scratching the surface, because oftentimes it is great. It can actually work with, let's say, 40 to 50% of the common domains and whatever data it has seen from the internet. And there are so much things out there in the internet. But again, whenever you are trying to use it in a very specific product, in a very specific project, with a very specific set of users, with a very specific domain, then I think it's very hard to make these models work exactly as you want, because a model can never solve a problem. There are so many other things, as I think one of it's rightly mentioned in the question, that there's the data, there is a proper understanding of user, of the domain, of the problem, feature engineering, and then finally deployment and finding out how your model is working. On a high level, this GPT-3 is great at hallucinating things, and it's already doing a excellent job of hallucinating what the common things what it has seen. But again, that you can't just run the world with hallucinating, right? So end of the day, you really have to control the model, and that controllability is greatly missed in GPT-3. So definitely it's a great step, it's probably a right step, but there is a lot to do. And I'm not sure about GPT-6 and GPT-7, but even if the GPT-6 and GPT-7 comes up, I think there would be still a great deal of controllability, ethics, fairness, and user friendliness that will be always applicable to all the AI models, and we still have to work on it. So yeah.
I think I'll just add one thing, that there are so many people who have been talking, so many business folks who keep approaching that how can I use GPT-3 my specific application, and a friend gave a very interesting analogy on how to explain to everyone what GPT really is, and that is that it's just a really smart autocomplete. Right, so that's a very concise way to just talk about it and explain to them, and it's not a silver bullet that's going to solve any domain specific problem that you might have related text or just general intelligence.
Also, I think there's another related question to GPT-3 is, does it support Indic languages like Hindi, Gujarati? Does any of the panelists know? I have not explored it myself.
Can answer that.
I don't think so. I mean, you could still fine tune the model with a limited amount of data, but I'm sure that it will be very different, because it has been trained on English, but and all of these Indian languages are extremely different in their the way they have been spoken, the vocabulary, and all of that. So I don't expect it to work.
So I'd like to add to Bodhi, though it was trained on other languages. So I've seen a blog post where they use GPT-3 with German and Russian. So I don't know if Indian languages are a part of that model. I'm still waiting to get access to the GPT API to try this out. So it is possible. We don't know.
Yeah, it is possible, as I said, and as I said, that you can still fine tune with with a limited amount of data. But yeah, it definitely have to try out that.
I would also like to add one thing. I mean, in today's world where attention spans are short, having interesting demos is the best way to capture people's imagination. We all have seen similar thing for BERT last year, and then now for GPT-3, and maybe next year we might have a GPT-6 or a GPT-7. In a larger direction, the model will keep on becoming bigger and bigger until they achieve a perfection. What people really want to say, okay, this is maybe similar to a human brain. And that is when the compression or the condensation part will start to kick in. But you also have to think from a pragmatic point of view. Fine, there is a GPT-3 available today, but will it solve problem in industry? Maybe not, because you need to test it extensively to see how it performs on variation, how it does on noise. So like me and my team have done a work where we show that BERT actually does extremely badly with the industry data, because there is a lot of noise in the data. And that's a very practical aspect. There will always be spelling mistakes and stuff like that. So you have to take all of this with a pinch of salt. A friend of mine always says that most demos today are like putting a lipstick on a pig. They look amazing, but then you have to really test them extensively to know what works, what doesn't really work.
Yeah, so I think if I were to kind of put it in a funny way, I think don't book don't judge a book by its cover, or don't judge a movie with its trailer, right? So I mean, these are important because I think it kind of captures people's imagination and it inspires people. But I mean, as we have said in multiple times during the webinar, I mean, building a model is a small part of being a data scientist, and a data scientist also is a small part of building a product. It takes a lot to kind of build a product, right? So I'm not saying that it's not important, but I think there's so many other factors also that come into play, whether it is like validity of data, whether it is the impact of different kind of metric, the optimizations, the engineering aspect. Like for example, Anuj talked about GPT-3, right? I mean, GPT-3 is a huge model. Even if we get a model, it may not be possible to serve it in an online fashion. Cool. I think, is there anything else that you want to add, any of the panelists want to add, or we can end it on that note?
I was saying, I mean, one practical advice that we can, I mean, give to sum up the whole thing is what we call as make it work, make it better. Start simple, make the whole thing work, see, put it in production, see if it is working, is it solving the business use case, and then try and upskill the model one step at a time. Rather than spending a lot of time coming up with a very killer model and then realizing maybe not having the right data, or not solving the right problem, or maybe not able to move the needle on the business metrics that really matter. So I think that would be one thing that we can share as a pragmatic way of going about applying AI in industrial use cases.
I would just very briefly address, if I'm audible, there was a question around marketing and AI, so I'll just briefly address that. Now there are AI companies that help you define creatives, what would be the right, how should a particular ad look like, or how should a particular promotion look like. Similarly, now there are also AI companies that are helping you define what your new product should look like, not just your creative or marketing, but essentially what the product also looks like. Especially in the fashion, this has become quite prominent, that given past successes and the visual representation, buyers can essentially decide what needs to be built or what needs to be purchased. So a lot of stuff is happening on the visual side. A lot of standard stuff in terms of large data processing and standard NLP has been around for some time.
So so Nishan Joshi has asked this question that as a AI startup, we find this question to building the product, should we train or deploy custom model, or should we use what is the APIs that are available as SaaS? And my question, and I get this question a lot, which is why I wanted to address it, is kind of taking a segue from what Anuj said, right? Try to build and see if that is kind of giving you value, right? Value maybe could in terms of product differentiation, it could be in terms of adding revenue to your product, or gives you a certain edge, right? And experiment and see if that API gives you an edge. You can always build and replace the API with your own custom model, right? So my thing is like try to I always advise startups to try different APIs, try different models, and with the lowest amount of friction, and whatever works, then double down it and maybe build a custom model, right? So that also kind of brings us to the iterative part of this thing. So you don't need to kind of invest so much in the infra to do that. I think we have addressed pretty much most of the questions. I think maybe we can stop at that note. I think we are quite ahead of time. But yeah, I think it was very interactive. We had a certain flow, but I think the questions actually drove most of the questions, which is exactly what all of us wanted to be useful to you. With that, I thank the panelists and thank the organizers for giving us a platform for this.
And thank you for moderating and helping us throughout the journey, the book as well as this. Thanks a lot, Vinayak. Thank you, Anurag and Shashank.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. I'm Calcutta to hosting us, and thanks Vinayak for agreeing to moderate the whole session, and all the panelists as well. And thank you all of the participants who have joined. We know it's a dinner time, so we won't keep you hold off for a long time. But again, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is Anurag from It was a great session. Thank you, Vinayak, for taking all the time to moderate this. Thank you, panelists Harshit, Anuj, Gupta, and Sowmya for the interactive session. I'm pretty sure everybody here learned a lot. And as is available from the amount of interaction that happened in the chat box as well, everybody had a lot of questions and answered them comprehensively. And I'm pretty sure everybody's taking up a lot more than what they had when they came. Thank you so much.